I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, how parental presence shapes a child's development with Dr. Dan Siegel. In today's episode, I am sharing a powerful clip from my conversation with Dr. Dan Siegel during the COVID-19 pandemic. He's the co-author of The Power of Showing Up and several other impactful books on parenting and child development. This conversation with Dr. Dan Siegel is one of the most downloaded episodes of the show, and frankly, one of my personal favorites. Dr. Siegel shares incredible insights about the profound impact of parental presence on a child's development, emphasizing that it's not about being a perfect parent, it's about being there with awareness and attention. In this clip, we touch on the importance of emotional safety, the power of repairing when we mess up, and how self-compassion is key for parents navigating tough moments. This episode is full of wisdom that can make a big difference in how we show up for the kids in our lives. I would strongly encourage you to listen to the full episode for even more insights from Dr. Dan Siegel. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. In the book, you talk about the 4 S's. I am wondering if you could talk about the 2 of the S's in depth today. Not that the other 2 are not important, but I want the listener to get the book first and foremost, to study and learn on their own. Second, I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to keep you forever here. And the 2 that I have selected are safety and soothe. So let's start with safety. What does safety mean? Are we talking about physical safety? And then I have some other questions.
Yeah. So let's start with safety. And again, these things we come up with are all, the science of them are all deeply studied and reviewed in a book called The Developing Mind. So when you take the science and say, well, what does safety have to do with anything? And then here's the answer. It has to do with everything, right? And in fact, that's part of what makes the pandemic so hard, is when we feel unsafe, we get reactive. We go into survival mode. And that's very understandable. You know, when we're threatened and we don't feel safe, our brain in our head activates a whole particular system of how to do that. Now, some people react to a lack of safety in one way. They may get really frightened. Other people may get really angry. Other people may get really sad. We have different temperaments, so we may react differently. But the overall idea is that for a young child, our job as their attachment figure, which means the caregiver, often it's the parent, but in human beings, we have more than just the parent. That's the attachment figure. So we need to recognize that in something called allo parenting. A-L-L-O means other. So safety is basically what attachment is all about. So I'm glad you're starting with this, Anna, because safety is the bedrock of what a child needs from us. So yes, it's physical safety for sure. Our job is to keep our children physically safe, keep their bodies from harm. And here's the other thing it also is. It's emotional safety. And what that means is, let's say I've had a really bad day and I come home screaming at the top of my lungs. Even if I'm not screaming at my daughter or my son, I'm scaring them because I've kind of lost my mind, right? I'm really agitated, not at them. It's something that happened at work or in politics or whatever. So I'm screaming. Now, it's one thing to express an emotion like anger or sense of disappointment in the world or whatever, that's fine. But when I'm expressing something so intensely that it actually terrifies my child, this is what we mean by emotional unsafety, right? They're not emotionally safe. Now, I can make a repair, and that's something I should do. Let's say I come home, I'm agitated at work, and my daughter hasn't done her homework, or my son hasn't, cleaned up his room or whatever. I can now scream at the top of my lungs at them. So now I am terrifying them. Now you can say, yeah, but you're not hitting them. That's really terrible to hit them. I go, yes, hitting them is bad. The research shows there really isn't anything good that comes when you hit your child. It's a bad thing to do. It's bad for them. It's bad for you. It's not helpful. And it usually shows you don't have any other effective strategies. So you need some help building strategies. So I'm not hitting them, yes, but I'm yelling at them. And that's another way of them not being safe, because the terror they feel is what colleagues of mine in the field call fright without solution. Now, why is it without solution? Here's why. If you go inside the brain of the child, the deepest part of the brain says, I'm being terrified right now. I need to get away from the source of terror. Okay, well, that makes sense. Terrified of a barking dog, I run away from the dog. Terrified of, a scary movie on TV, I run away from the TV. Fine. That's pretty straightforward. Here's the problem. When the attachment figure is the source of terror, there's a higher part of the brain in a child that says, I'm scared. I should go to my attachment figure to be protected, because that's the most foundational role you play with your child. So if you are, even unintentionally, if you are scaring your child, one part of their brain says, get away from you because you're the source of the scaring. The second part of their brain at the same time says, go toward you. So their brain fragments because one part says, go toward you. The other part says, go away from you. They have one body. There's no solution. So this is called in our world, disorganized attachment, and it has the most challenging outcomes for a child because they have what's called dissociation. They literally have a fragmentation of their mind, and it's healable, but it's a serious condition that can be prevented. So that safety is a great one to start with, Anna, because yes, of course, we want to keep our kids physically safe, but especially during a pandemic, we are, what's classically called flipping your lid. You are flying off the handle. You are becoming unintegrated is the way I would say it, where your behaviors are either chaotic or rigid, but in whatever way, they become really terrifying to your child. And a state of terror induced in a child caused by the parent is the cause of disorganized attachment. And you can prevent that. You really can. So safety needs to be repaired if it's ruptured. And it is the most concerning one because the most disabling form of attachment that's not secure is called disorganized. And so this is a great one to start with. And so it is more than just keeping kids physically safe. It's really showing up and understanding when we ourselves are in a reactive state, doing things that are terrifying to our kids, and then making a repair if we have done that, and trying to reduce the frequency at which they happen, the intensity with which they happen, and the duration at which they happen, but realizing it is significant if you are repeatedly terrifying your child, even if you're not touching them. Emotionally terrifying them is a fragmenting negative impact on your child. And so doing the inner work to say, why am I flipping out? What is going on? I need to actually find a way to keep my child emotionally safe.
Yes, I was working with one dad. I teach court-ordered parenting classes and co-parenting therapy. I do. And most of my clients are dads because they're the ones who are mandated by the court to take parenting classes usually. And one of the dads was confessing that he hits the child and he has temper and all of that. And he was feeling bad and he needed new strategies and he wanted to work on himself. But before he got to that point of recognizing that this is harmful, he was justifying basically his actions and his behaviors. And I just had to pause and ask him, I said, what if somebody treated your child the way you do? Like, what would you do to that person? And he looked at me with such anger and said, are you kidding me? And he became very angry. It's like, it's a perspective shift, right? We would never allow other people to treat our children the way we treat our children ourselves.
Exactly.
It's just so startling sometimes, right?
Well, that's a great example of not showing up. When you're there physically and emotionally tormenting your child, you're not showing up. You are dumping on them unresolved stuff, usually from your own past. And your question is so brilliant, Anna, because, when that father could try out looking from a distance at his child being treated by another person like he treats his child, I assume he wasn't angry at you, but he was angry at the person you were imagining. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is where, and this is hard to say, but parents have also this process of dissociation. So they can fragment their minds, and a part of their mind can feel justified in yelling and screaming at their child. Partly it could be, they were yelled at and screamed at, so they think it's the norm. But even more than that, in that alternate state of mind, they actually rationalize, many parents do, why what they're doing is good, why what they're doing is okay. Teach their child a lesson, the child deserved it. Things like this that are absolutely irrational. And if they thought of another person doing it, they would actually go after that person. But here they are in an alternate state. So that's the problem, is that when most parents are doing actions like that, they're in a different state of mind than when they're calm and you ask them, what would you do if someone else was doing that? They're in a different state of mind. So they don't even see that, because the mind has these state-dependent ways of acting. And we have to have a kind of a deeper perspective. So to make sense of that, you need to understand how the brain gets into these very specific states, and understanding how your own history may have made you vulnerable to these terrifying states to your child is essential for your child's well-being.
Yes. What other ways parents might not be protecting their children besides the ones that you mentioned?
Well, this is a little different than causing disorganized attachment, but there is a way where kids may feel like their inner life is not being, this is the S you don't want to talk about, or wasn't on our list, of not being seen. And so in that way, they can start feeling like they're invisible, but it's also a form of lack of safety. If I come to my parent and say, I'm feeling really scared of this, and they go, no, you're not. No, you're not. Pretty soon you can get terrified that the actual experience you're having is being treated as if it doesn't exist. And you can be obliterated that way. One of the emotions that sadly come up in that situation is shame, where a child, different from guilt, where you feel like a child, may feel like, I did something wrong, I'm going to correct my behavior. With this kind of lack of safety, the feeling of shame comes up. And shame is not that I've done something wrong, it's I am wrong. And in being a defective, piece of garbage, it's so painful because I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do. It's not about changing my behavior. It's just who I am. So when parents sadly do things that have a child feel shame, not just, you shouldn't hit your brother, that's a bad thing to do. Okay, I won't hit my brother anymore. That's guilt. But a deep kind of shame where a child doesn't feel seen and is made to feel terrible about who they are. They carry that with them, and it goes underground. And when it travels through adolescence and adulthood, and then we ourselves become parents, that shame can be triggered. So that, in that case of I was talking about a father feeling invisible, not only just being irritated that my daughter's paying more attention to my wife, but I might start feeling shame, like this is revealing how really invisible and deserving of invisibility and how bad I am and I'm not lovable. All these things go along with shame. So I then react to that with fury toward my daughter. And this is, you can see this in parents. You can see this in politicians. You can see this in all sorts of people in the world. And when that behavior takes over, it obviously can become very intense and frightening for everyone around it, because it's as a child, of course, it's like this is your whole world. And the parent acts with such fury and focus, and they're not open to reasoning in that shame state. Yeah. And that's what trauma can do to people. And if they don't do their inner work and they start shoving that onto their children, then it's this cross-generational passage of this behavior that is so unhelpful.
New to Authentic Parenting podcast? Welcome to a journey of healing and transformation. Since 2015, we've been pioneering the conversation on trauma-informed parenting and how doing your own healing work can make you a better parent. With over 10 years of content, it can feel overwhelming to know where to begin. That's why I have curated a special playlist just for you, a collection of 10 hand-picked episodes designed to help you get started. Want to understand how trauma impacts your body, brain, nervous system, parenting, and relationships, and how to heal and transform your life? Join world-leading experts like Dr. Gabor Mate, Deb Dana, Dr. Paul Conti, Dr. Dick Schwartz, Thema Bryant, and many more who have shared their wisdom on our show. Start your journey today. Download your free trauma kit now at authenticparenting.com/trauma kit. That's again, authenticparenting.com/trauma kit. Can you share some strategies you have in the book, very well outlined, strategies that promote feelings of safety? And particularly, I want to talk about the repair one.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the idea is that, okay, none of us are perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. It's just about being present as a parent. So showing up, And so if you do something that scares your kid, which I've done, and maybe you've done, Anna,
many times.
Yeah.
You don't know what I did yesterday, so I don't even want to. I hit the rock bottom of my parenting. I ran out, I used the strategy that I would never use. Yes.
Okay. Well, we've all done that. So I'm not going to ask you to give us the details unless you want to, but we've all done that. And in the books I write, when my kids got older and they saw what I was writing in the books about how I would really do inappropriate things, they go, "What's wrong with you that you would make that public? You look like such a jerk." And I said, yeah, I'm putting this in these books because I want people to know that even if you study this stuff, I'm an attachment scientist, you do therapy, I'm a therapist, you are still prone to being a human being, amazingly, and you can mess up. And so the idea is repair. And I would say to my daughter and my son, you guys are just fantastic at articulating yourselves. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to write this. So when they were younger, they said it was okay. When they got a little older, they said, "You can no longer write about us." And I said, okay. And then Tina was able to write about her kids. So that was very helpful to have her then become my co-author. So the issue is repair. So the idea, let's say I'm a person with shame. And I've done the inevitable thing that most parents, I've met a couple parents who haven't done these things, but they're very rare. And usually there's some other issue going on, like they're very emotionally unpresent anyway. So they just never get emotional about anything. And that's got its own problems. But for the most part, most parents flip out sometime and do things that are scary for their kids, for sure. So if part of that action is filled with shame, you yourself may get so angry at yourself, say, "Oh, look what a piece of garbage you are," that you don't have the inner resources that you refer to get present, to show up and say, "I'm sorry, what I did was wrong." Because when you say, "I'm sorry, what I did was wrong," it unveils a deep sense of pain you have about your own shame that you're not lovable, that you're a piece of garbage. And so you don't even want to bring that up. So ironically, the deeper the shame, the more likely it is you'll make a repair, and that will induce more terror in your child and more shame in them. So this is where you see cross-generational passage when parents aren't showing up. It can lead to kids not being able to show up even for themselves. So the repair process sometimes begins with the inner work of saying, okay, I see shame isn't an accurate belief I'm defective. It's a developmental acquisition at a moment when I was not being seen, and maybe I was unsafe, maybe I wasn't being soothed, and I felt the reason I wasn't getting what I needed was there was something wrong with me. So instead of going and losing my mind because my parents weren't reliable, I said, oh, my parents are reliable. The reason they don't give me what I need is because I'm a piece of junk. So that's kind of the developmental equation for shame. And so once I got to realize that, then I can say, okay, all right, I reacted in this way. I need to go back and say, I'm human. That's what making ruptures means. You're human. Doesn't mean you're defective. It means you're human. And then you go, okay, and then I show up and then I reconnect with my kid and tell them, let's talk about what happened, because I think what I did was really not right. And it may have terrified you. What was it like when I was screaming at the top of my lungs and telling you, you're not going to have your guitar for 2 years or whatever, when that's the most important thing in your life, or things that I've done, what did you feel? And then you talk about it. And in my kids' case, they had this incredible skill of, in a loving way, but kind of painful, but I had to take it. They could say, yeah, this is what you did. And they would act like me to show me what I was like. Because I said, well, how did it feel? And they said, this is how it felt. And then they would show me. And it was really quite accurate and painful to see how excellent they were at mimicking my outrageously inappropriate behavior. And then we could work it through. And, and I would work on the issue. And in the book Mindsight, I actually talk about one incident in a chapter called Crepes of Wrath. It started at a crepe store, but you'll see the whole sequence of, a lovely interaction going to a crepe store that turns into a disaster, and then going for a rollerblading time with my daughter, who then says, what was going on? And I tried to explain the issue of my brother's relationship with me and how it related to her to brother, relationship with her brother. And then she goes, why don't you figure this out on your own time?
So that brings me to a question that I'm dying to ask you. Is there a degree to which a parent can overdo the repair process? Is there that the child can view it as, my parent is weak, my parent is not even a good parent, my parent is not a confident parent? I'm wondering if you can speak about this. Does this give us permission to mess up all the time, knowing that we're going to repair? Can it trivialize this process?
Yeah, I think those are a great set of questions, Anna. So let's just say that if the repair process makes you think you have no work to do and you can keep on terrifying your kids because you can always repair, then that's a problem for sure, right? So I think it's great that you're bringing that up. So no, it isn't like, oh, keep on doing it because you can always make a repair. No, the idea is that things will inevitably happen. You should try to reduce their frequency and all those things we mentioned. And so here's what I want to share with you. The idea of is this a weakness? Mm-hmm. There's a word called mindsight, which is the ability to see the mind's feelings and thoughts and memories and stuff like that. There are mindsight skills of insight and empathy that children can learn from their parents. Now, when my wife and I were raising our kids, our friends in the children group we would have, they would say, I talk too much to my kids about their feelings. Now, I'm a psychiatrist, so I would look at them, I go, what did you just say? They said, you talk too much to your kids about our feelings. Well, there was this moment when our oldest kids were getting ready to go to high school. And one of them, his parents really never talked to him about his feelings, but they told him what to do and how important it was to achieve. And when he ultimately went to college and our son went to college, the difference between the two of them was so stark that when their son got lost because he had no idea what his feelings were, his thoughts, what had meaning to him, his personal sense of an inner compass that could guide him on his way, which our son had, because those are mind-sight skills. Their son didn't have them at all. And those parents came and said, we really made a mistake because now our son's off at college. He's completely lost. He knew how to do what we told him to do, to build his resume, to go to college and blah, blah, blah. But he has no idea who he is. And so as he's trying to make decisions, and we're not making them for him anymore, he doesn't know what to do. But look at your son. He's got this inner guide that stays with him forever, even when you're not there. So that set of experiences told me that even though some parents may say, oh, you're talking too much to your kid about making repairs or things like that, I don't see it that way. The research is very clear. Parents who make repairs have parents who are able to help them have security, and secure attachment is the bedrock for building resilience. Now, part of that is, the soothing. That was the second S you wanted to talk about. When you're distressed and your parent sees you, even if there's been a rupture before the repair, the parent then wakes up from their reverie of anger that they're going through, and says to you, whoa, let's talk about what just happened, because I don't think I should have been yelling like that or giving you a timeout for 2 years or something, So let's talk about it because, you're such a jerk for doing like that. And you say, well, you don't need to call me a jerk, but I appreciate what I did was very jerk-like. And you're right. And let's talk about how you feel. So then you are showing up as a parent for the repair. And the soothing part is that instead of being alone in despair, what the repair does, it makes a bridge that links the two of you as a we. Because all these ruptures we're talking about, they separate us from being a we. It's your kid and you, and that's your kid versus you. And we're not even talking about adolescence, which I talk about in the book Brainstorm, but, that's a whole different level of potential fiery stuff going on. And you have a 7th grader, so you know what I'm talking about. So, the big challenge for soothing is, do you have the inner resources to show up so that you can tune into what your child's experiencing, let them feel a part of a we, and in doing that, whatever the emotion is, terror, sadness, disappointment, this feeling of anger, all the basic emotions we might feel, including shame, if we're not able to feel those, then when our child has those emotions and is wrestling with them inside of her or himself, when they're trying to share them, we just either ignore them or deny them, or in other ways get distressed by them. And our child learns, wow, if I show sadness, my father freaks out. So I think I'm going to learn not to show sadness. And if after a while you can't show those feelings, then you kind of don't even show them to yourself. So soothing is also a really important S, where it basically means if I'm the child, I'm in a state at this moment that's really, really uncomfortable. I'm in a state of distress. It could be any of these emotions or others that we're talking about. And in that state of distress, I'm really suffering. And soothing means a parent shows up, notices the suffering, in their mind says, what can I do to help reduce that suffering? And then takes action to reduce the suffering. It might be just sitting with you if you didn't get accepted into a play you were auditioning for. Say, yeah, that was hard. Let's talk about it. Or it could be problem solving, or it could be just getting at your child's level and tuning into the feelings they're having so you don't feel alone, and just exploring whatever those feelings are, not trying to get rid of the feelings or solve the emotional equation, just exploring what is. So I have an acronym PART, which is be present. That's the showing up aspect. Attune, meaning tune your attention into the internal experience of your child with a lot of curiosity and openness. So PA is attune. R is resonate. Let yourself feel. what your child is feeling inside of you. You don't have to become them. Like if they fall down and hurt their knee, run up to them, on the sidewalk where they fell down and you fall down and you grab your knee and go, oh my God, my knee. No, that would be mirroring. This isn't mirroring. It's resonating. You can feel their fear of falling, that they're bleeding from their knee. And now you hold that inside of you, you're changed because of it. And the T of parts, so presence, attunement, resonance, trust, is that there's a trust that's created, that your child knows that even if he falls down and gets a huge scrape on his knee because of something he did that was, quote, irresponsible because he's a kid, you don't go and yell at him, I knew you would do this, you stupid kid. No, you get down and you are present, attune, resonate, and trust is created in the we that is part of that soothing process.
Yeah, I just want to comment on something. As adults, I see a lot of adults like this, that when they were kids, they were not allowed to feel or express any feelings, right? Any quote unquote negative feelings. Let's say, the parents were happy when the kid expressed joy or other positive emotions, but the negative ones were shut down, dismissed, minimized, punished for, and things like that. What I've noticed is a lot of children, when they were young, they learned to cope with situations. So they learn not to feel those feelings and sort of shut their heart. But when you shut your heart, it's not like you selectively shut your heart to negative feelings and leave it open to positive ones. You completely shut down your heart to the positive ones too. So I feel like this kind of people who were not soothed properly in childhood, or they were not raised in what I call emotion-friendly households, have a hard time not only relating to themselves, to others, to know what they're feeling, but they are also, there's this dullness of experiencing vitality and enjoying life.
There is. I agree with you. And it's when you look at the ways kids develop, in part, part of it is temperament, but another part is attachment, this range of emotions. If those emotions in the emotionally unfriendly house are really constricted in how they're shared, emotion is a very social experience, they're going to be very dulled. It's true.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss future episodes, and take a moment to leave a rating and review. It really helps others find the show. I would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. Join the conversation in the Authentic Parenting Facebook group, or visit the contact page at authenticparenting.com/contact to get in touch. Authentic Parenting is an ad-free show, and your donations is what makes this podcast possible. Support the show by visiting authenticparenting.com/support or becoming a patron at patreon.com. Your contributions make it possible for me to continue bringing you weekly episodes. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.